This episode is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. DirecTV Stream is your home for baseball. With the most regional sports networks of any streaming TV provider, DirecTV Stream gives you the most local baseball games. And that means more doubleheaders, triple plays, and no-hitters from your local team. Watch this season's action on DirecTV Stream. Get the best of live TV and on-demand at directtv.com/baseball. Regional sports networks are available with choice package or higher and may vary by zip code and package. Not available in all areas. Compatible device required.
From Sugar 23, I'm Angela Ledgerwood, and this is Lit Up. This week I am sharing one of my favourite episodes ever from the archive. It's with the British writer Max Porter, and it was a conversation we had about his first novel, Grief is the Thing with Feathers. It was one of the most affecting books I've ever read, and I truly missed a subway stop because I was so engrossed in it. Now, you might be asking, why share a conversation and a book about grief on a long weekend coming up over Easter? But I think when you listen to this conversation, you will know why. Hearing Max and I talk about messy families, relationships, and yes, grief, will make you want to hold your family just a little bit tighter this long weekend. Max is also the author of a couple of other books, a novel called Lanny, and a work of experimental fiction called The Death of Francis Bacon. I hope you enjoy this episode. See you soon.
And we're here to talk about your debut novel, Grief is a Thing with Feathers. And I was just telling Max before we were recording how devastating, riveting, shocking, and funny this book is. And yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
And I was just sitting here blushing.
Perfect. Well, because it is such an unusual book, perhaps you could read a passage for us so we can get a sense of it, what it's like, and then we'll get into this discussion.
Okay. Crow. Once upon a time there was a babysitting bird. Let's call him Crow. He had read too many Russian fairy tales. Lazy Boy Burn, Baba Yaga Howl, Decent Prince Win. But was nevertheless an authorised and accredited caregiver, much admired by London parents, much in demand of a Friday night. On his newsagent advert it was written, Nappy Valley and beyond. The telly went off and Crow suggested a game. You two boys, he said, must each build, here on the floor, a model of your mother, just as you remember her. And whichever of you builds the best model will win, not the most realistic, but the best, the truest. The prize is this, said the Crow, stroking their shampooed hair. The best model I will bring to life, a living mother to tuck you up in bed. And so the boys set to it. The one son went for drawing, furiously concentrating like a little waist-high fresco painter, scrabbling hands and knees on the scaffold. 37 taped together sheets of A4 paper in the full rainbow of crayons, pencils and pens, his front teeth biting down on his lower lip, heavy nasal sighing as he adjusted the eyes, scrapped them, started again, working his way down, happy with the hands, happy with the legs. The second son went for assemblage, a model of the woman made from cutlery, ribbons, stationery, toys, buttons and books, manically adjusting, leaping up, lying down, like a mechanic in the pits, clicking and tutting as he worked his way around the mosaic mum, happy with the face, happy with the height, and stop, said the Crow. They are both extraordinary, he said, admiring their work. You've got her smile, you've captured her posture, her shoulders were hunched to that exact degree. And the boys couldn't wait to find out who had won. Which one? Which mum? But Crow started hopping, avoiding their gaze, suppressing a giggle and turning away. Crow, which one of these fake mums has won us a real one? And Crow was quiet, laughing no more. Crow, don't be funny, let's have our real mummy. And Crow started crying. And the boys cooked Crow in a very hot oven until he was nothing but cells. This is Crow's bad dream.
Thank you. Well, I guess from that story, everyone might have a sense of kind of how dark the book is, but it's obviously about grief, which is in the title.
Yeah.
But I guess firstly, because this crow is such an unusual character, where did he come from for you?
Well, I knew that if I was going to tell this story as a triptych, as a 3-part thing, and the boys were one voice, and they're the sibling relationship as a character, and then the dad was one voice, I knew that I needed something very heavy and very black and very linguistically disruptive to be the middle part. I knew it had to be noisy and dark because I wanted to write about the noisy darkness of that trauma, of that space, and I wanted the language to reflect it. And then I thought, the crow has such an incredibly long symbolic life. You know, he's always been the animal that human beings have used to tell stories about death. So I kind of couldn't resist him. And then I also knew that I wanted this to be a book about poetic obsession and how one's any artistic obsession can come alive and haunt a person. So I thought it's too good to be, I can't not put him in. And then also because of the Ted Hughes thing, I thought if this guy's obsessed with Ted Hughes and his obsession actually manifests itself in their lives, then it's got to be Crow, because Crow, the Hughes poems were written at that traumatic point in Hughes's life. So it all just added together, and it was irresistible. So I put him in. And also there was a time when it was going to be Telemachus from the Odyssey was going to be the middle voice, and it was going to be this boy who came to live with them and taught them about waiting, and in fact the impossibility of a return, the fact that that dad never comes home, mum never comes home, that when loss is loss, and he was going to be a kind of lifestyle coach. But then I thought, oh no, I've got to use crow. And then I was in my garden, and I don't get crows really where I live in South London, but they're massive crow, like a comically large crow, just kind of splatted down in front of me in the garden and went, Quah! And so it was like X Factor or something.
Yeah.
I was like, you're in, like an audition. So, and around about that time, possibly because of an impatience with the novels I've been reading, and possibly just in a kind of foolhardy way, I was thinking, what would it be like to make a book that was like a bird, that was crow-like? And so I'd been looking at videos of crows, and I'd studied crows a little bit and read a lot of books about crows. And then I had this idea that the actual book itself could move like a bird, like a crow, so that it could hop around and be very vulgar and do things that shock us and that offend our sensibilities, like eating baby birds and licking up vomit or whatever, and then also be incredibly beautiful, and that be its defining characteristic, that it moves between the upsetting and the beautiful, like a bird does.
That's incredible, because when I started reading the book, I really felt like I'd never read anything like it, and it screeched at me, and I was like, I could feel the claws and the feathers and the sounds of the feathers, and it was like I was having a sensory experience that I'd never had before with a book.
That's a really nice thing to say. Thank you. I think one of the things that we do in publishing, that the publishing industry as a whole underestimates, is readers' willingness to go places they've never been before. You don't need any signposting, I don't think. I think you can just start, because the conventional wisdom, especially as regards death in books, is that you need a kind of run-up. I don't know who said it, but someone said a thing about killing a cat, and that you can't kill a cat on page 1 because the reader needs to know the cat's relationship to the mother and the father, and where does the cat fit in, and where's the cat in the domestic space, and blah, 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 otherwise there'll be no sentimental punch. And I feel, possibly as a reader of poetry, but mostly as a reader of kids' books and fables, that that's just not true, and you can kill a cat on page 1, and that the pain is the launch point. This book begins in total blackness with like a giant testicle and all kinds of smells and senses, and that you're dropping your reader in there, and I think that's fine, that's good. I hope so. It's a bit like seeing a piece of art. So say you saw like a Louise Bourgeois spider, and you're on your own in a massive room, and there's a huge metal spider, and you're not sure whether it's a spider or a monster or just a piece of scrap metal. Like, I prefer to just experience that. I prefer to just walk into that room and see that and figure it out. Whereas if you go in and you're given a piece of paper and it says, when you go in, you'll see a spider that represents, sibling rivalry, and it was made in 1974. That somehow robs it of all its
and I think
impact.
The best art does impact us in the way you're talking about. It's visceral, and it's actually the art that doesn't resonate too well that needs a lot of explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just there's so much in what you were just saying to kind of pick up on, to go back a little bit, to Ted Hughes, that period when he was grieving for Sylvia Plath. How is your Crow different to his, and why did you want to make him so different?
That's such a good question to be asked. The first thing to say is that Hughes's Crow was many things, but never very bird-like. Those poems are so ugly, and he wrote them to be anti-poetic, and they were an act of aggression towards the very polished lyric poetry of that time, and they were also a figuring out of this incredible darkness and guilt and horror, but also they're about the 20th century, they're about the failure of language and the bomb and, this collapse of language and everything. And so the first thing I knew is that I didn't want my Crow to speak anything like Hughes's Crow, because I'm not a poet, I'm certainly not a great poet, do you know what I mean? Those lines are extraordinary, the Crow poems. But I also thought, if this is the character, then he's had 30 years of hindsight, like he's seen what this book meant, and I hope he would have a bit more of a sense of humour, and he would have read all the biographies of Plath and Hughes and could gently poke that for his own gain and for humour and for a kind of affectionate, critical energy. But also I thought that maybe that's just one. He is rolling that around in his palette. He knows about Hughes's Crow, and he knows his dad has an obsession with it. But also he's the hider, myth, trickster, and he's also kind of the sort of heavy metal Crow, and he's also the kind of tourist tack Crow. That he's got this whole like weaponry of different symbolic and artistic roles that he can float in and out of. And he's also, I hope he's a bit funnier than Hughes is,
Yeah,
he takes himself
funny.
less seriously, I think, and that's important. That's kind of, if I have any kind of postmodern agenda in this book, is that the male poet that takes himself so seriously needs to be ribbed a bit, mocked a bit, tickled a bit, and that good things will come of that. If we reanimate the work by like vandalizing it in a way.
And does Crow vandalize the poem, the Emily Dickinson poem in the beginning, or is it someone else?
Do you think it was Crow?
You know what? When I began the book, firstly, when you open the book and you see these lines of Emily Dickinson and they're scratched out, and the word Crow is written over certain words, I thought, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And I thought in the beginning I wasn't sure. Then halfway through the book I thought maybe the father's obsession with Crow has made him see Crow everywhere, and so he's kind of gone in there almost like, fuck you, Crow, but you're everywhere. And then, at certain points you think, oh, it could be the boys when they've grown up a bit and they're trying to make sense of what happened. And then at the end you think it's Crow. So
you're my perfect reader. That's exactly the point. Because the boys would have done it as a kind of, because they're mischievous, because they're boys, because they'd like creep into their dad's study and be like, fuck you, Dad, and as you say, and make their little effort. But it will be Crow as this kind of act of manic, egotistical hubris, this like, I am everything. Like in the beginning was the word, and the word is always Crow, like I am everything. But it would also be Dad's kind of note to self, like I couldn't even read Emily Dickinson anymore. Or also, on a more profound level, philosophical level, that what Dickinson is proposing about hope, you can also map onto grief. Like there is this enormous range of generative possibilities for thinking about hope and for thinking about grief, and thinking of it as something that might be ecstatic as well as painful, that great joy can come from learning to think harder about the people we've lost and the space that opens up in a life. So it's all three of them. And also, because at the end of the book, Crow speaks in his own voice for only one time. It's the only time, and he says permission to leave, and he writes, and it's the first time he's not playing. There's no literary illusion. There's no puns. There's no kind of gamesmanship of voices. It's the only time he speaks as himself, and I like to think at least that he's got to that point with Dad's help, and in a way that language, that style he has, which is a kind of free verse, but it's also quite sort of English and matter of fact and quite tender, that the boys and Dad have helped him get to that point. You know,
Well,
in as
that's it.
much
It
as he's
is-
helped them,
yeah.
and he's become analyst, and he's become babysitter, and ultimately he's kind of become a friend to Dad. But they've given him the language which allows him to do the one thing everybody's been wanting from him, which is to just tell us what happened in a kind of abstract and gentle way.
Well,
And I didn't plan
yeah.
that. I knew, that arrived at the very end of the book. I'd got to the end, and I knew I had to do two things. I knew I had to finish the book, which I knew would be the dad and the boys saying goodbye. And I knew that I wanted that to have some kind of sentimental gorgeousness. You know, I felt I don't want to finish this on a black note. I want to finish this with love. I want people to feel love and to have some blank space where people can put their own feelings in there. But I also knew that I owed Crow. Like, he'd done a lot for me. He held this whole 3-part thing together, and the least I could do was let him speak in a way that wasn't Hughes and wasn't, you know, and that felt for me quite cathartic even, you know, because I'd invented him to be troublesome. And then I think you need to thank the trouble in your life, you know, a bit like when you phone your brother after 15 years and be like, oh, I was a prick. Sorry, I was a prick when I was 12, you know. It's my way of thanking him.
Yeah, because it is a reciprocal relationship in the end. One of the things I loved at the beginning of the book when Crow says, which I found incredibly comforting and I needed it, he says, I won't leave until you don't need me anymore. And
Turns out I plagiarized that.
oh, who from?
I think Nanny McPhee says it.
Oh, no, but
Or Mary Poppins
but
or someone. I didn't know.
something like what your mum would say to you
Yeah.
when she's tucking you into bed when
Yeah.
you're a kid,
Yeah.
and you're having all the kind of your first existential, you know,
Yeah.
issues
Yeah.
of like, someone's dead. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And it just made me remember how much we need those types of figures in our lives who will stay as long as you need
See
them
it out.
to.
It reminded me in a way, just you saying it like that, the birth of my first child. You know, men are hopeless anyway. I know this. I am a man that knows how hopeless masculinity is as a guiding structure of our lives, and I hope that, you know, we're living in an age when that's more or less acknowledged now. But in the childbirth scenario, men are just useless, right? And a lot of men struggle with that, or faint, or go to the pub, or whatever they do. And our midwife said to us, your job is to just pour water onto Jess's back. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. So I had my jug, and I was like, oh yeah, doing a great job here. And she was like, oh, that's nice actually. And I was doing it, and then she was like, fucking stop with the water. You know, at a certain point, she was like, enough of the water. And the midwife's like, doing a great job. Keep on going with the water. And I was like, all I can do, like, I'm not leaving till you don't need me anymore. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to keep pouring the water on your back. I think at one point she actually
saying,
punched
fuck you. This is, you know, hopeless. Also, what it felt like it was such an amazing idea to have grief actually be something physical. And I'm thinking about the things that plague us in our minds, whether it's a darkness or depression or a terrible grief, and how because we can't see them or touch them, it kind of increases the anxiety about them. And how important was it for the boys and Dad to actually see and touch? And for him, I mean, when I read the book, he is real. Crow is as big as a man, and he has these great feathers, and he's warm.
Yeah.
And
smelly.
Yeah, and really smelly.
That's so good that you think that. Because someone's making a play of this, and they said that they won't have him fixed, which I love. Sometimes he'll just be sound, sometimes he'll be like a big 60-foot scaffold, other times he'll be like a pathetic little hand puppet, and other times he might be a bird, and other times he might be the boys in costume. You know, they would all take their turns being him, which I love. I think the thing is that it would be so boring if he was just imaginary, if he was the dad's imaginary friend. So the big moment for me was when I was like, he's going to play with the boys. Like, the boys are going to envelope him into their childhood world. So, you know, colouring pictures with them at the kitchen table, and them hearing Dad and Crow arguing and those sorts of things. Like, because the domestic space is extraordinary, and I think that's how your childhood memories are framed. So if there is any kind of gamesmanship between two siblings about who was where and what happened when, it's all the state. It's like this 2-dimensional stage set of the flat Like all the action happens against this thing. And I thought Crow would have to almost be the person rolling on the scenes, like he's the stage manager as well. But I think we, in terms of finding a physical, we're object-related people, so many of our rituals are need objects, whether it's like prayer beads or the going into a space or the holding of a photograph or anything like that. Like we must take some of the pressure off the psychological burdens of loss or terror or fear or whatever it is, and use objects. So I thought, in a way, I'm just giving these kids this multi-purpose thing they can use in any way they like. Do you know what I mean? Like they can use it as a punch bag, or they can use it to cuddle. And the comforter is the same thing as the antagonist in a way. Like the object serves its purpose in lots of different directions. So yeah, it's nice that you always think of him as physical. Because I think if you're looking at how the architecture of the family is exploded, I think with sudden death as well, like it's not like, as I say in the book, there's not like an illness. No one's prepared for it. And I think the fundamental thing that changes is time, your relationship to time. So even the daily routines, they're not the same anymore. Everything is bent and warped. And therefore, by putting Crow in there, you have this sort of, like, in a way, he's providing the one thing that isn't available to people in grief, which is an object world, like the security of something, which is ironic because he comes with such bad language and such aggression, but that he's representing the thing against which they might root themselves in a way. He's like the scale model or something. Yeah.
Well, and as the dad, the kind of one of the opening scenes is the post-funeral, where the dad doesn't know what the structure of grief is. I think I haven't experienced grief in this way yet, but we all know it's coming for us. Where I've just been lucky to not lose that, those people kind of very close. But somehow in reading the book, there's a foreboding of knowing it's going to happen, and it heightens. All those relationships just come kind of zinging towards you, and they're clear, and you kind of have a sense of grieving for them ahead of time. That's not even a question. That's just kind of my experience of it.
Amazing thing to think. That's very generous. That suggests that the reader of a book is in collaboration with the author, which is just an amazing thing for a writer to be told. Loads of people died in my life around about the same time. Not when my dad died when I was a kid, but later on as a teenager. Sort of a load of family, friends, and grandparents. I lost all my grandparents around about the same time, and so I went to a lot of funerals. And a woman, a friend of mine who was a teacher of mine, had died as well. And so it was this kind of cluster of people that I was looking to for moral guide, people whom I trusted, and so I sort of had this aloneness in the world. I was like, the world is so shabby without X. There's less to trust, there's less to hold on to. Like, I don't like what I'm seeing in the world, politically and whatever. I'm repulsed by so much that I see, and I just wish that person was still here because she would tell me how to be in the world. And one of the things that I most remember from that time is how repellent I found the ritual of grieving, the funerals. I found just so inappropriate, especially for people that were so full of life and would have said, "Don't put me in a wooden box, with gold doorknobs, and like, we'll go and sit in a church in like uncomfortable suits and then have your crappy cup of tea and biscuit." Like, that is not right for me. And then sure enough, we do it. Like, none of us have got the balls to actually say, let's have a party, or let's all go to the river and swim naked and, have a good time. It's not celebratory. It's this kind of weird, chamois use of them, even though it's a secular society, and not many, we're all still sitting in the church singing these hymns, to somehow say goodbye, but it's not a proper goodbye. And so it's lots of Crow's language about the shamming, the fraudulence of notions of moving on, and the cliches of gratitude and everything, are my anger at that inappropriate way we do it. And also, one of my favourite things about my stepdad is one time we were at a funeral, and we were all sitting, like, piously in the front row in our uncomfortable suits, and he tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Do you think your cousin's kind of sexy?"
Oh my God.
So inappropriate, but thank God.
Yeah.
Like, thank God we're not all just sitting here pretending to have the sad thoughts. Like, he's actually just noticed that my cousin's sexy, and that's a good thing. And I felt grateful to him for that. And that's a kind of like, I mean, that's applying the trickster thing to something much more benign. And like, Hughes's crow is a trickster in terms of language and God and the phallus and blood and religion, you know, all this stuff. My crow is a bit more helpful to the daily lives we lead. Like, he's a trickster in terms of like loading the dishwasher or coming home from school or like not giggling at a funeral, those sorts of things. And those are the things that's the bread and butter of our lives. Those are the things we have to do. And I think you know, the whole book is an attempt to think better about how we might honor the dead, you know, the dead that we know and the dead we don't know, just how to think harder about it and how to, you know, so it's, I mean, I have a Korean author who says that all her work is an attempt to mourn better, to refine, you know, the thinking one is doing about the past. But that's, for me, as a civilization, we don't do it very well.
No, and especially in the West, we don't do it well.
It's terrible, and especially like I mean, what bugs me particularly, I have this major bugbear, which is the kind of remembrance industry. So the idea that we all get together several times a year and we wear things on our clothes and we sing the songs that say we honour the dead, we actually don't. Because if we did, we would be pacifists. We would have we would have changed, as we said, you know, never again. We would have changed our entire military and socio and economic circumstances. We would have honoured them by actually not doing it again. But the truth is, we don't. We do it again. We sell the guns. We make the wars. You know. So in a way, it's like, how do you map that onto the domestic thing? So actually, will we be as funny and nice to one another and as sarcastic and as energetic in our criticisms of hypocrisy and those sorts of things as she would have wanted us to be? Like, that's what he's doing to them, is a daily recharging of the onwards of the kind, and there's such a shitey way of thinking about things, that you would move forward in a straight line to a point of like betterness, like fixedness, as though that's some kind of benchmark of normality. Like, he's encouraging them to grow sideways and tangled and around, and that part of the brokenness is part of you, that there isn't a place you're going to get to where the pain is less. The pain is a part of you and is intimately connected to the joy. You know, that life is very, very, very sad and very, very funny. You know?
Well, and that, I feel that Crow does push them to the absurd. Like, there's so much hysterical, you know, so much joy in this time, that I felt it made me think, you know, do you have to wait for some jolt in life to fully live it? And why? And I wanted to say no, but then how am I going to, like you say, kind of have the balls to really do something about it? And I think, but another thing I loved so much is that this family, they were fully living. Like, it was, you know, the dad says we were smack bang in the middle, years from the finish, taking nothing for granted. And I really got a sense that was true. Like, this family was in that blissful point where they as a couple, they were just discovering, even after many years, who they were to each other, and how that love was different with these kind of crazy children running around, and yet
with hard stuff as well.
Yeah, with all the hard,
with
and
the
just
bickering and the fighting.
It was gritty and real, and yet they were in it, knowing it was so good, and that the kind of terror of having that taken then is awful.
I think a trope of lots of writing about grief is that thing about people saying, I did take it for granted. I wish I had told her. And so I wanted to do a sort of almost a sibling to that set of feelings, which is that I did tell her. She knew how I felt. We loved our bickers. We knew we were, he calls it them post-mortem dinner party post-mortem bitches or something. That this is self-conscious. Like, we are aware of how tired we are right now, but also how lovely this is, how we haven't had sex for 3 weeks, but that doesn't matter because last time we did it was great, or whatever. You know what it is? Like
and I love the Post-its, like cocksucker. Oh no, what was it? On the bottles of wine she'd leave around the house.
But I mean, I have to accept I went to the hottest place imaginable to write that, which I had tried not to, but I did at a certain point think, well, okay, I need to give this guy, I've created this man, I think I like him, I think he's convincing, he's not like me, but he shares some characteristics with me or people I know. So then I was like, right, on that kind of baseline, let me think what would happen if Jess died, like if my wife was not here suddenly and everyone had gone away and I'm in this flat, like with the boys, and then I just sort of thought about the number of things left undone. So there would be a Post-it note on the Post-it note on the wine says, "Oh no, you don't, cock cheek," or something like that. And I think that's it. Like when a person dies, they don't suddenly become a very serious dead person. They're the same person that morning would have taken the piss out of you, or mocked my shower gels or whatever it is. I collect shower gels.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it's my one luxury.
From hotels or
no. Like buy.
He's like, oh no.
About 5 years ago, I got given some Aesop. Shower gel when it was just in Australia, and from my Australian sister-in-law, and it blew. I wasn't much of a showerer, like I wasn't a big washer. Like I'm like most boys.
Are you a bath?
No. I'm a showerer, but like sometimes my wife would be like, "When did you even last wash?" No, she'd be like, "It wasn't Friday, it wasn't Thursday, it wasn't Wednesday. Shit, you haven't washed for 6 days." I was a bit like that, and then we had a new shower put in with some pressure, and I had this Aesop shower gel, and I found I was showering it twice a day. And also, I can't, let's just do the shower conversation. I can't believe people wash in the morning.
At all?
No, I can't believe people wash in the morning, but not in the evening.
Oh, yeah.
It seems really weird to me, because you go out in the day and you get covered in dirt.
Yeah.
And then you take that into your bed.
Yeah.
So I wash in the evening, but now I also wash in the morning as well. And I'm buying all these natural, all these like beech wood and eucalyptus shower gels. It's great, and I fucking.
Are there any new brands that you've just discovered? I'm trying to think.
Well, my biggest luxury actually was given to me is Ortigia or something. It's called Ortigia.
Oh
man, it's insane. I can't remember. It's bergamot and peppercorn or something. It's wild. And I poofed myself right up. I get really foamy. But anyway, my wife thinks it's just preposterously stupid and sad that I'm so into my shower gels, and she thinks I only need one at a time, which would be so boring.
So you get to choose which flavour, which scent.
Yeah, and I won this prize, right? And so I got half the money, and we're doing really boring things, like we're paying our bills off. I'm debt free for a little bit anyway, and then like fixing the car and fixing the damp problem in the bathroom, all these kind of things we're doing. And we're taking the kids to Legoland theme park. And then I was like, and I am buying some really good shit, like some really good stuff. So when you see a thing of shower gel and you think like £25 is just a grotesque sum of money, but I'm doing it. It's my one luxury.
I think that's such a pleasure. Do your boys know which scent you've gone for? Are they in on it now?
They know they're not allowed to use my shower gel.
Oh, I see.
And one time I found the boys were all in the bath together, and I said, "Look after the baby, I'm just nipping next door to get whatever it was." And I came back in, and they were all like lathering up with just my like fucking special one. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And they smelled amazing. I was like, "You use the cheap stuff." But so that's exactly what I mean. Like if God forbid, I lost my wife. You don't, which would be deeply annoying because I'd have to stop publicising this book. It would be too close to home. I should take out some insurance or something against that. Anyway, so I hope that I wouldn't suddenly move into some register of like po-faced seriousness about like, she would want her to carry on, like she would, all that kind of stuff, which would be true. I would also work so hard to have the Crow mentality, which is that every time I would use my posh shower gel, I would hear her saying, "You are a dick." Yeah. I've got to keep that going, because we put these people in, my dad, for example, was a man who only now, like 25 years after he died, are people actually telling me what he was like. Because while I was growing up, he was wonderful, he lit up the room, he was the life and soul of the party, this sense of unfinished business, this kind of shrine we build around people. Like only now am I finding out he was a fucking dick. He was a hopeless man who made a catalogue of terrible errors and then died. that I'm not going to love him any less. In fact, I'm going to love him a lot more now I know that, and now I can empathise with that, and start to see how difficult it is to make the right decisions, and when you fuck something up, how hard it is to get back on the right path, and those sorts of things. But so Crow is here to say, tell children great stories. Tell them not necessarily. It's not. The distinction isn't between true and false stories. It's between wonderful stories and not. Hence all the Russian fairy tales and everything. Like, tell them fabulous tales, but also don't bullshit. Like, if you don't make it. Don't use templates that you think are going to satisfy children's emotional needs. Like, children are incredibly good and have huge imaginations and can handle big things. So you don't need to say your dad was an alcoholic, but you could say your dad was a big red-faced man who hiccuped and burped and farted a lot. Those sorts of things. You can tie it back to children's lives and children's bodies in a way that gives them something to chew on. Because otherwise we all just, as I say, we're all just sort of sat in the church going, how sad.
Yeah. And unless we talk specifically about the people we know and love, it is all those platitudes you talk about.
The most devastating document I think I've ever read, actually it's a whole folder of devastating documents, but I got given some letters that my dad had sent, and they're an extremely sad narrative of a person's unhappiness, and letters that were written about him after he died. But one of the amazing letters he sends is to my mum, who would have been his ex-wife, saying how nice it was to see us when we went and visited him in hospital. He had an accident and we went to visit him in hospital. And he says, I was so struck by how different the boys were. And he says, Rolly, my older brother, was sort of he seemed so kind of private and wounded and a bit sad. And he seemed to have his defences up. And Max was all just chit-chat and gibber-gabber and whatever. And I was so ecstatically thrilled to see him make a distinction between us and to describe us accurately in a way that was actually quite surprising, because I've always thought that I was the one drifting off in the corner having dreamy thoughts and my brother was kind of snippy, snappy and chatty. So firstly, it kind of busts a myth that we've been told, and also it just separates us, because we were the boys. We went everywhere together. We were, so everyone in the car, where are the boys? What did the boys do over the holiday? And just to have him send from the dead, from Hades or wherever he is, sending this bulletin of nuance, that was just so thrilling to me.
And that he was watching.
That he was watching and thinking and taking the time to describe. And that's only 5 lines in a letter, but it's the impact of it stretching down over the years is enormous to me. Hence this the creation of these kids, where they are one thing, but within that thing, the sibling relationship, there is infinite play and difference and detail,
And I love how they get to a point where they're able to make fun of their dad now, and that's part of, it was too sad before for dad, or they become the caregivers almost. I wondered, I'm so glad I remembered to ask you this at this point, if you could read another small section, the Birds of Prey section.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, on page 75.
Yeah, I'd love to. I never read this.
Oh my gosh, I needed this so badly, this part.
This actually happened.
Oh.
Recently. And it was one of those cool things. I was at work on the book, or at least I was sort of thinking about the book, and then we went to a Birds of Prey flying display, and this thing that happens here, and I've invented the guy. Obviously, it just happened, and the guy told us what was happening on his little microphone. But it was one of those lovely things, like, this will work for my book, and this precise scene, repurposed into a scenario of a mourning and recovery, will take the total thrill we've all just had watching this cool thing, and just ramp it up. It will serve such a bigger purpose. And that made me kind of think, one of the first times, I want to be a writer. Do you know what I mean? I want to go out into the world
and find
take stuff and change things and jimmy them into my books. Because I'd never thought of myself as a writer before. So, yeah, I'll read it.
But we have to talk about that after you've read this, because that seems wacky.
Okay. Dad, we went to a Birds of Prey flying display in a field, deep country somewhere, with 6 old deers and the plump ginger guide with a radio mic. Here she comes, star of the show. The first bird out was a bald eagle, stunning, massive, with a 6-foot wingspan. Ooh, yeah, we said. Ooh, yeah. The boys were transfixed. Now look as she decides whether or not to turn on the... Oh, there she goes. Lift, up she go. That's my girl. And she soared. She got lift. We got lift. The boys were gripping the plastic seats, and the situational artifice of the captive bird performing dropped away, and I was just excited by the bald eagle, the physical magnificence of the eagle. Oh, now, here you are. Who's this? Oh, lordy, you tasty little bugger. Excuse my language, folks. It being springtime, the carrion crow in this field here is protecting eggs, as well you would with a bloody eagle about. How about that? That, ladies and gentlemen, is a brave little bastard. That is a crow surfing a bald eagle. I turned sideways, and the boys were spontaneously holding hands. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the bloody miracle of nature. That is 2 birds basically giving each other a bloody great nod of respect. You may be many bloody kilograms heavier than me, about 40 times my size, but if you come near my eggs, I'll show you a thing or two about flying. Up we shot, all 3 of us, a standing ovation. Go, crow, we yelled. Why ever not, said the red-faced lover of birds, our dude, our guide. Why ever fucking not? Go, crow! Go, crow. Go, crow. And that was probably the best day of my life since she died.
I just love that. Thank you.
Why did I choose a random North English accent?
It's great.
Next time I'll do French. I'll make him French or something.
Oh, no, it's brilliant. Okay, so I have to say, the comment you made before that you hadn't thought of yourself as a writer, even though... Okay, so you're an editor. Did you get into this whole business thinking that you just wanted to shape other people's words?
No, I love shaping other people's words, but it was kind of accidental. I was a bookseller, a very happy bookseller. I ran an independent bookshop in London, and I thought I'd do it forever. I loved it. I earned a good wage, and we were opening new shops, and it was a cool way to spend my life. But I gradually I gradually found that I was frustrated, and I was writing little scraps of things and keeping sketchbooks and notebooks, but I was never getting anything done. Partly because of the working hours, and partly because of the kind of anxiety of influence working in a bookshop. Like, you think you've had a great idea, you write it down on a bit of paper, then you open a box and there's the new Anne Carson, and you're like, Anne Carson's the best, I'll never write. And so starting the new job, I got this new job, and I found that I think it's okay to say this, I found that I was good at it. It was a natural thing for me, being an editor. And being a commissioning editor, reading 150 novels a year and choosing the one that I think I can make work, and I think that fits the literary credit, the criteria of our list and all those kind of things. I love it. I love covers meetings. I love working with publicists. I love standing at a launch party and saying, "Here is this guy's book." I love it. And I'm really honoured. I publish some of the best writers in the world, and I inherited some of the best writers in the world. So, like, I inherited Rebecca Solnit and Patrick DeWitt and Ben Marcus, people who I'm 100% committed to, and I would have left my job if they weren't so damn good. They're so good, And then, so I had this slightly personal trigger, which is that I met my dad's best friend, and he told me some stories about my dad that made me think, right, I'm going to write that book. Plus the kind of crow obsession was galloping forward, and then I sort of started to fiddle around with it, and then I found I had this. Whereas most people might have a kind of anxiety of becoming, or like who they'd show it to, I found that it was just totally private. My wife was watching Orange is the New Black, so she was like set for weeks on end. My kids were in bed. We only had 2 kids at that stage, and there was a little room I could write in, and I just found, like, night after night, I was creeping back in and doing it, and with no reader in mind. I didn't want to send it to anyone. I certainly wasn't thinking about publishability. I just was, for the first time, once I found this 3-part shape, I had a voice, like I was doing it, and it felt right, and it felt true, and I had all these notebooks, and I had hundreds of little bits of paper I'd kept from when I was a bookseller, so I never ran out of steam. I always had more material to work on, and if anything, it was a problem of keeping it out. And then I finished it, and I was like, I even remember going through and Jess saying, "You're in a good mood," and I was like, I finished something. and I think it's cool. Would you like to read it? You know, it was a total surprise to me.
What happened when she read it?
She just thought it was really weird. She said, it's really weird. I don't think anyone will publish it. And I said, well, I think I'd like to show it to some people and see. First person I showed it to said, it's incomplete. Maybe it needs pictures. And that was a really good moment for me because she's someone I trust, but I also felt she was wrong. And I felt that actually... I certainly didn't think it needed pictures because I thought it had...
I want
pictures in it, right?
I want to have my own crow.
Yeah, it's got pictures in it. And then she said, well, maybe it's the first part of something longer. And I thought, no. I think the fact of it being short is its strength. If it was any longer, it would violate that. You know, I was aware that it was quite finely tuned, and if you put more on it, then it violates it. And I had written some prose bits for the mum. I'd written the mum's voice. And I took all that out because it seemed to undo something, and it also robbed the boys of the opportunity to describe her in absentia. So these sorts of things felt good, and I was like, I'm ready to actually stand by this, and then gave it to Faber. And now it's being published in 22 languages or something, which is insane.
Because everyone, it is that good.
It's embarrassing
so
that when I first,
special.
Because it was on my Gmails, because I didn't have Microsoft Word, because I'm too stingy to get Microsoft Word. And the guy at work wouldn't give me
Wait, the whole thing was written on...
Yeah, so I would send it back and forth in Gmail. And then I put it in a Word document and press word count. And I was like, no. There's a 0 missing. And then I printed it out at work, and I ran to the printer to check no one else would find, how embarrassing, Max has written a novel, Max has written a novel. But it was just 12 pages. And it felt big to me. It felt like a long thing. And then I was flapping it around thinking this is just pathetic. But then, then that's when good publishing steps in. I mean, when they were typesetting it and they were starting to talk about the fact that they would make it look like what it is. They would make it look like hybrid of poetry and the play, and they'd breathe that white space into it, and they'd split it into... It was just that lovely thing that happens occasionally in your working life, that it just gels, like a product just comes into being, and it seems to be somehow destined to be itself, just itself. No one put anything in this, they just let it be itself. And to see that happening now in foreign languages as well, where people obviously can't just translate this, they have to turn it into something else. Make it work in Spanish. He has to be a Spanish crow, and Spanish crows are complex things. They've got their own shit going on that I don't even know about, and they've got Basque swear words, and they've got weird rhythmic swagger that I can't, and they're doing it because I trust them. It's lovely, absolutely lovely.
Oh my goodness, I'd love to hear it. Well, I kind of was craving to see it performed,
right?
Even just as a one person,
right,
like you read it.
Well, you will be able to see a play. Someone's doing a play in London, and they said a cool thing, because lots of people wanted to make a play, and it came with kind of proposals. But then the theatre company we're actually going for said, we're just going to get all our favourite people, and we're going to hire a space and close the door. And you can come in if you want. And then 6 weeks later, we'll have a play. And it may bear no relation to your book, or it might be kind of exactly your book, and we don't know yet.
Wow.
Yes. This is this thing of it being in flight, off it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing you should ever do to a crow is try and control it. He's cleverer than us. You know what I mean? He's cleverer than me. I've got to let him go. And it's exciting.
Gosh, I think that is just the perfect place to end on this beautiful note. Thank you so much. I've loved this conversation.
I've loved it.
And best of luck.
Lit Up is a podcast from Sugar 23. It's hosted by me, Angela Ledgerwood, and produced by Liam Billingham. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. The theme music is by Andrei Radofsky. In 2 weeks, we'll be back with Clemency Burton-Hill. See you then.